On this episode of Between Two Beers, we talk to Jonathan Gould. Shay, who is Jonathan Gould?
Well, he's the son of 1988 FA Cup winning manager Bobby Gould. He came out to New Zealand in 1989 as a goalkeeper, but ended up playing as a central defender for Napier City Rovers as they won the National League. He returned to the UK, played in the Premier League for Coventry, before a chance phone call saw him head up to Scotland and play for Celtic, where he embarked on a stellar career over 6 years. He returned to the lower leagues in the UK before jumping on a plane, heading back to New Zealand and embarking on a coaching career which saw him coach Hawke's Bay United, New Zealand under-20s and the Olympic squad before linking up with the Wellington Phoenix. Another phone call from Tony Pulis saw him jump back on a plane to the UK, where he coached in the Premier League and the Championship. And now he's back in the Hawke's Bay again with a new role and a bucket load of stories to tell.
Yeah, what a great chat. We spoke about playing with Henrik Larsson in his prime at Celtic. We spoke about beating Rangers, winning the Scottish Premier League and stopping Rangers from winning 10 premierships in a row. And we spoke about playing against the class in 92 at Coventry in the Premier League, what it was like playing against Cantona and Giggs and facing Ronaldo at the World Cup. And we spoke about moving back to New Zealand, the reasons why, and his thoughts on promotion and relegation in New Zealand's domestic national league. Gouldy was the perfect guest. His stories got better and more epic as the episode progressed, and I know you guys are going to enjoy this one. We're pretty stoked to have a new big-time sponsor on board, Craft Bar in Hamilton. Craft are sponsoring a number of episodes and genuinely happen to be our favourite spot to dine in Hamilton. They have a range of 15 different craft beers, and their beef tartare is, again, genuinely the best in New Zealand. If you're in Hamilton, make sure to show them your support. Mention this episode's secret phrase, smell the glove, and you were entitled to $20 off any tab over 100, valid for a week after this episode is published. Craft have also supplied a new specialty Swedish beer for each episode, and tonight we're on the Dugges Fresh IPA. Cheers, Craft. Watch this episode on YouTube or listen on any decent podcast app. Enjoy. Jonathan Gould, welcome to Between Two Beers.
Good evening, guys. Nice to see you both.
Yeah, nice to see you too. It's been quite an interesting night. The fuse blew in the Holloway office about 20 minutes before we were due to go on. So we've raced across town to Seamus's office. All sorts of mishaps and mumblings, but we've got ourselves a beautiful Swedish beer, thanks to our new sponsor, Craft. We're on the Fresh IPA, 7%ers tonight.
How do you pronounce it?
Dugges. Believe it is.
Dugges Russian. Yeah, let's see how we go. 7%ers could be interesting.
Anyway, how's life from your end in the Bay, Gouldy?
Yeah, been back 3 weeks now, having come out of quarantine. So I'm trying to I've got a small lifestyle block out towards Waimara on the beach, and I'm just trying to get some fencing done and make sure that the animals can't get out or in.
What a spot. I was down there Queen's birthday weekend. First time to ever go down there. What an absolute spot that you call home now.
Yeah. It's been our home for best part of 10 years. We moved down to the beach and obviously done a fair bit of commuting all over the world since then, but it's very nice to be home.
So, Gouldy, we're going to dive right in. We're going to talk about your illustrious football past. You played 400 games as a professional footballer, 150 for Celtic, 2 for Scotland, won 2 Scottish premierships, numerous cups, played in the Premier League as a goalkeeper. But then on our research, we found that in 2005, aged, I want to say 37, you returned to Napier and played in the New Zealand National League as an outfielder. And I stumbled upon this because there's a story in the New Zealand Herald about you being the world's most tested man for COVID or something. And there was a photo of you in an outfield playing kit with Nathan Holton in the background. And we're like, hang on a minute, he's a goalkeeper. What is going on?
He's either claiming across with his head or he's definitely playing centre half. So what happened here?
Yeah, what actually happened was as sometimes is the case in Hawke's Bay, you get a strange request, and Wayne Atkins was our first choice centre back, and he came up to me on the Thursday. He said, "Look," he says, "it's one of my kids' birthday parties. I don't think I'm going to be able to get there until the second half. and we were really quite short at the time. And as a coaching group, I think Perry Cotton was my assistant at the time. We went through it and went, well, I'd already played centre-back in the National League back in '89. He said, why don't you play the first half? And as soon as Wayne arrives, he can slip straight back in. I must add, though, at half-time it was 1-0. Wayne came on and it finished 3-0 to them. So I'm not quite sure what that says. But Jeremy Brocky gave us the runaround on occasions during that day.
Well, so interestingly, so you that's listening to you. That's not the first time you played outfield. So you were back in. You first came out in 1989.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you played in the National League again in the outfield way back then?
Yeah, I was. I came out obviously as a goalkeeper. I hadn't actually turned into a goalkeeper until I was 20. I was an outfield player up until then. Had a long discussion with my father, who was then manager at Wimbledon, and he basically said it to me as bluntly as possible. He said, if you really want to be a professional footballer, he said, the only chance you've got is in goal because you can't run. So I took his criticism as constructive and spent the next sort of 6 months training with him at Plough Lane in a sandpit. So when I then came out to New Zealand, because the exchange at that time was between Wimbledon and Napier City Rovers, and it was set up by Colin Stone. So when the opportunity came out, I came out with a lad called Brian McAllister. Obviously came out as a goalkeeper. But it'd be fair to say that Clive Holmes was probably better than I was at that time. I didn't get in the team, and then we had an injury crisis, and obviously I volunteered to play centre back and played 4 games, and I think we won all 4 games, and I scored against Manurewa against Frank Van Hattem. So yeah, strange introduction to New Zealand football. So, I got a winner's medal, obviously, that year because it was such a fantastic year for the club.
Amazing, because all the goalkeepers I've played with have been absolutely terrible in the field. So you're quite an outlier, and that kind of man sitting across from me.
I'm just going to jump on something before we move on. I'm a football anorak, so hearing that you went down at the sandpit at Plough Lane with Wimbledon to turn into a goalkeeper, are you training with Dave Besant and that sort of carry on? Yeah,
David was the goalkeeper then. It was actually the FA Cup final year, so it was a fantastic place to be, as you can imagine, with the crazy gang when they went on to beat Liverpool at Wembley that year. And what I did, I wrote to 92 Football League clubs, asked for a trial. I was working at Barclays Bank at the time, asked for a trial, and I got 30 responses, only 2 of which were positive. One was from Arsenal, and the other one was Derby County. And the goalkeeper at Derby County at the time was Peter Shilton. And I thought to myself, right, that's probably the best place I could go in any walk of football life, is to go and work with one of the best goalkeepers in the world. And Arthur Cox was the manager at Derby at the time. And I think I probably did the longest trial stint ever. I was there for just short of 10 months on trial. I had a couple of loan spells out, and then Arthur told me it was time to leave and to go and make my own way, really.
That is incredible. So a couple of episodes ago, we spoke about Stephen's experiences trying to get to the US and like trying to come through with VHS tape and stuff. So there's no tape involved in sending letters to these. It's literally just a name on a bit of paper, and I'm a goalkeeper. Please give me a chance.
I've still got. I think the letter's out in the barn somewhere. I've still got the letter, and I've still got all the responses. And that's as simple as it was. It was a typed letter. It wasn't a computerized. It was something I did on a typewriter.
92 times.
Well, I think there were photocopiers in those days. All right,
sorry, I'm doing you a disservice.
I did have to sign it 92 times though.
Wow. All right, Gouldy, we're going to jump around a bit, but I want to dive straight into the good stuff. And I've heard you tell this tale a few times on a few different podcasts and interviews I've listened to. But talk to us about when you made the transition from the Bradford City third choice keeper to Celtic. 97, I think we're going back to.
Yeah, I was third choice at Bradford, and in all seriousness, I was considering giving up the game. I had two young children and a wife to look after, and then Chris Kamara, who was the manager at Bradford at the time, clearly didn't rate me, and I was phoning clubs like Scarborough and getting knocked back and saying, "I'm available. I've got a year left contract, but I can get a free transfer if you want me." And Scarborough didn't want me, so it got quite depressing. And then all of a sudden, I got this phone call from an agent, who was my agent, but I wasn't really eligible for one, to be honest. And he says, Celtic need a goalkeeper. They're playing in Europe next week, and they've got to get one signed really, really quickly. So I said, okay, Murder, yeah, of course, I'm obviously interested in that. I'm third choice at Bradford at this moment in time, so I'll take that. And he so he put the phone down, and what I did then was probably the most sensible call I ever made in my life. I rang my dad and I said, Dad, do you know anybody at Celtic? I said, because my agent's apparently going to put me in there. And Dad said, yeah, I know Jock Brown, who was the CEO, director of football at the time. So Dad rang Jock. I then got a phone call from my dad saying, look, they are interested. They obviously know you've played in the Premier League. You were in the Scottish squad when you were playing well in the Premier League back in, I think it was 1993. So they know of you. He said, take your phone with you to training. So the first team at Bradford had gone away on a night out at Blackpool, and so the manager wasn't there. So the assistant manager was called Chris Hutchins. And I said, look, Chris, I said, I've got a real good chance of getting the move. The manager's obviously told me I can have a free transfer. I said, and I've got one in the offing. I said, but I need to take my phone with me. He said, yeah, but at the time I was sort of warming up and coaching the youth team. So he said, well, you can't run around with a mobile phone. And this is in the days, lads, when mobile phones weren't that big. Mine was
like a brick. Yeah.
We go back to the typewriter again here, aren't we? I had a battery pack and everything. No, I didn't. It was a Sony Mars bar. I don't know if you remember those. And they were quite cool phones at the time. And so I took it with me. And the phone rang as I was halfway around the first lap with the lads. And it was Jock Brown, and he said, I've got one question for you. He said, do you think you could play in an Old Firm game? When I said I've played in the Premier League. I said, I think I can play, Celtic Rangers game. He said, right, that'll do for me. He said, you'll be hearing from us. So then I put the phone down, phone went again, and Dad said, look, we've agreed terms. He says, get yourself back to the ground. Let's go and speak to Chris Kamara and get yourself up to Celtic. So I then drove back to the ground. Chris had just got in, and I'd obviously had a couple of beers the night before with the rest of the first team squad. And I said, I need to speak to you, Chris. He said, no. He said, I haven't got time now. I was always in his office, so he was probably pretty peeved with having to speak to me anyway. And I said, no, I really do need to speak to you. He goes, well, come on in then. He said, what is that? I said, I've got a free transfer. I said, can I go? Is your word still valid at the offer? And he said, yeah. He says, I promise you could get a free transfer. I said, right, okay. The thing is, I've got to go right now, and you've got to give me clearance by the end of the day. He says, what? He says, why is that? He says, well, they play in Europe next week. He said, well, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Celtic. And he's like, I've got to go and tell the chairman I've just given you a free transfer to Celtic. And I said, well, and true, to be fair to Chris, he let me go. And I got in the car, and I had a little Fiat Uno at the time, little black thing. And I remember driving like 3 hours, I think it took me from Bradford. And I got there, and you see the stadium, and you honestly thought this has got to be a wind up, for me to go from where I was to this club. But no, I walked in the door, signed my contract, and then the other little caveat to that was I then spoke to Jock Brown, and I said, "Oh, did my agent ring you?" And he said, "Who's your agent?" I said, "Oh, it's Murdo Mackay." And he went, "Yeah, he did ring." He said, "But he put Brian Gunn up, not you."
Wow.
So if I hadn't have made that initial call to my dad to say, "Do you know anybody?" My history would have been Scarborough reserves at best, I think.
Did they? So Brian, for those listeners that don't know, Brian Gunn was also a Scottish goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Were Celtic looking for? Like, was that one of the kind of the prerequisites that they wanted? Was someone that was eligible for the national team, or was that just a happy coincidence?
That was just a happy coincidence. They had a young lad called Stuart Kerr who was well thought of, and they had a lad called Gordon Marshall. And I was literally going there to be cover reserve in Europe 2 weeks later, and then they played me in a friendly against Roma. That was my debut at home to Roma. It was a full house at Celtic Park. We beat them 1-0, and I kept a clean sheet. And I then went on to play the next 48 games that season. So it was incredible turnaround. I rang my mate and I said I signed for Celtic. He went, "Stalybridge Celtic are a good side, you know." He said. I had to explain it as a different set of hoops I was wearing.
So let's talk about that season, because an incredible story that, for those who aren't aware, it prevented Rangers from winning 10 Scottish Premier League titles in a row, right? So talk to those who aren't aware of what a big deal that is, and the rivalry between Celtic and Rangers, and the sort of the big swelling of momentum that season had as it progressed.
Yeah, but probably wasn't that aware of what I was going into on the day in question. But then, having got there, realised that Rangers had taken nine titles in a row out, and that was following on from 9 in a row from Celtic. So the bragging rights to win 10 for two teams like that. Obviously there's a lot of talk around the sectarianism and the religion, and and that did take a long time for me to understand. But from a football perspective, the pressure was absolutely immense from day one, and the first 3 games the first 2 league games we got beat. We got beat away to Hibs, and Henrik Larsen scored an own goal on his debut, and then we played Dunfermline and got beat. And it would have been the first time, I think, in the club's history that we'd have lost the opening 3 games of the season had we not beaten St Johnstone away. And we beat St Johnstone away, and that kind of flipped the season straight away for us. It was that whole season, the pressure that I can remember, even leading up to the last game of the season, and we had to win at home to St Johnstone, and Rangers obviously had to win theirs. But we scored. I think Henrik Larsen scored after 2 minutes, and even then, I can remember. I watch that game live sometimes now. I say live, the broadcast live, and I still get nervous because I know that if you let a goal in, that's 10 in a row for Rangers. So, we're sat here now this season, and it's on again. But it's Celtic's turn.
So how does that Rangers Celtic compare? You played in the Premier League. Is that a different level?
Yeah. In respect of atmosphere, in respect of the animosity when you go to the away game, it is a completely another level. I've experienced derbies, but and then everybody will tell you in regards to an atmosphere, Celtic Park takes them beating on European nights. When you go in there into that cauldron as a player, and it's an Old Firm game, it's remarkable. It makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. You got no time to think. The game's, I think 92, 93 minutes. You guys have played, but it goes just like that. It's incredible. And unless you're probably losing 4-0 with 20 minutes to go, Ibrox, which I did a couple of times, when the whole season, that whole game seems to last your lifetime, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you were involved in like heavy victories and heavy defeats, right, during your
Yeah.
Celtic career. So, when you are on the end, like when you lose an Old Firm game, I guess
Yeah.
it's hard. You lose an Old Firm game badly. How much worse is that, or are they just as bad as each other? Irrelevant.
No, I think losing is bad enough. You won't go out. You don't go out for a week. You don't even really want to go shopping in the town. Because your own supporters are scowling at you. The Rangers supporters are laughing and scowling at you at the same time, if that's possible. So it's quite a unique situation to be in life, not just in football. Having said that, when I played in the 6-2 game, which I think every year they seem to run the highlights of that, and that was a remarkable thing to witness as a player, within the confines of the playing field.
Jonathan, there's a number of players you've played with and against and been coached by that I want to talk about. The one that grabs me the most and I'm most interested in is Henrik Larsen. So he played his first season at Celtic when you were there. How old was he? He must have been a teenager, was he? 17, 18?
No. I think Henrik would have been, he's similar sort of age, a bit younger than I am. So I think he would have been 24, 25.
What did you know? I mean, he for those who of a younger ilk perhaps aren't aware of what a player Henrik Larsen was. I mean, he went on to play for Barcelona. He won a Champions League playing with Ronaldinho and Samuel Eto'o. He went to Man United. Like, he's a top player. Did you know straight away upon seeing him at training the first time that this guy is one of the greats?
Yeah, I think the first thing that struck you with Henrik was he had big long dreadlocks. He had I'm just trying to think. It's not a funny attitude. He had an attitude that showed his belief. And when you look at his goals and you watch the movement that he made as a player, and the all-round finishes that he had. He wasn't a tap-in merchant, but he would score those if he was on hand. He would create half a yard for himself, and before you knew it was in the back of the net. But the one thing, and you touched on Barcelona. At the end of his career, he went from Celtic to Man United and Barcelona. And I remember, I don't know if you guys can remember, but I remember that Barcelona final when they were losing 1-0. And he came on as a substitute with 20 minutes to go. And he's revered by the Barcelona supporters for that game alone. And it was purely out of his movement. It was, it was his willingness to make an unselfish run. It was an incredible 20 minutes for a substitute to make. And people might not remember it, but I think most footballers will, that have played the game and watched that game.
Thierry Henry in a post-match interview made that comment. He's like, forget Ronaldinho, forget Eto'o. Henrik Larsen made the difference. He was the game changer. But what's it like as a goalkeeper? I mean, you're training with him every day. I'm fascinated by this as a striker. The cleverness of the finishing, the quality of the finishing. Was it such a higher level than you see it like when you coached at the Phoenix or National League? Like, how different is it?
I think it comes down to unpredictability and having a range of finishes as a striker. And Henrik had all that. I mean, the one goal that is still seen as one of the greatest Old Firm goals was where he went through, he nutmegged Compton and he went past another player and he kind of scooped it with the outside of his foot, but it had reverse spin. I've never seen a finish like it in my life. But you knew when he was out in front of goal, he was not going to miss the target. As a goalkeeper, you knew he was going to hit the target. So you knew you were always going to have a job to do when he was out in front of you. But the other thing was as well, guys, it was his work rate was impeccable. And one of the sadder moments, and we were playing in Europe, I think we were playing out in Lyon, and he was chasing back towards my penalty box to cover. Yeah, and he broke his leg. He broke his leg 10 yards outside my penalty box. And as horrific as it was, that shows what he was all about as a player. I can give you an insight into Henrik and how the team loved him. he was going into contractual negotiations, and I think the owner was Fergus McCann at the time, and he did an amazing job resurrecting that football club. But when it came to Henrik's contract negotiations, he didn't really handle them very well, and it got to the point where, as a group of players, we got involved, and we basically told the chairman, saying, look, don't worry about our wage structure, don't worry about how much you're going to have to pay him, because at the end of the day, at the end of the day, we knew that he was going to win us football matches and he was going to win us leagues. And if we'd have lost him at that point, he went on to play over 7 years, I think it was, and scored like hundreds and hundreds of goals, and won everything, obviously, with us. I think that was a big meeting, that.
Were you surprised at how long Celtic were able to hold him, with how good he was? And obviously he's gone to Barcelona and could do it at that level. Were you surprised he stayed at Celtic for so long?
It's probably a bit of lack of respect for the league, to be honest. Henrik Larsen's I think he got a couple of golden boots while he was there, and people went, oh, it's only Scotland. But what you've got to remember was that in 2000, 2001, when Martin O'Neill took over, we were signing players like Chris Sutton, John Hartson, and Neil Lennon for £8 million. Then, they don't sign players for that kind of money now. We had an incredible team, and so therefore I think there was probably a bit of lack of respect for the league, if anything.
One of the other characters, I'm not sure if I've got this right, but did you cross paths with Paolo Di Canio as well?
With who?
Paolo Di Canio?
No, he left. No, he left the year before I joined. There was Paolo and quite a character, and there was Cadetti as well. And Cadetti, that was a weird thing. And we had Big Vidukes as well. Big Mark Viduka was there. He came in. He was a big signing for us, and him and Henrik together, they were goal machines when they were a duo. They were fantastic to play with.
The other character I'm quite interested in was your coach, Wim Jansen. I think I'm sure I've murdered that pronunciation.
Stephen's great at pronunciation.
But I've heard you talk about some of the sort of the mind games and the lessons that you learned who going into a successful coach yourself now. What are some of the things that you learned from him during that successful season?
He was a subtle coach. He wasn't a shouter. He was methodical, and there were things that I understood retrospectively from him as a coach, and there were simple things, but it was like tight areas when he knew that we were going to St Johnstone away or Dunfermline away, and he knew that the teams were going to be ratting against us, so we were going to have to play out of tight spaces. The one thing he did do, and it used to wind the players up. Well, we used to wind the players that weren't playing it. We used to train at Parkhead on a Friday before home games, and he used to play the starting 11 against 7, right? So he knew we'd have lots of space at Parkhead at home, and that's the 7 that weren't playing. They used to get absolutely infuriated, and they used to start kicking lumps of shit out of us, to be perfectly honest. And then there would be refereeing decisions going. He would make really bad refereeing calls. But Wim was, Wim had come through the Dutch program. He was a legend in his own right. Played in 2 World Cups. Fantastic player, and also had coached through Feyenoord. He was brought up. In a fantastic environment as a footballer and a coach. So, for us to have him for a year, we were very privileged, I think.
And then along the journey, Martin O'Neill come along, and I've heard you describe him as the best man manager that you ever come across, despite the fact that when he came in, he sort of. So can you talk to what made him so great as a man manager?
I don't think he wanted to get rid of you, didn't he? You had an interesting conversation, didn't you?
He wanted to get me out of the team. I suppose that's the same thing, isn't it? No, I think with Martin, he had an abundance of characters in his dressing room, and And he obviously, in respect of the players that were already there, he didn't know what he had, so he had to give it time to unfold that group of players. But what he did do was he signed characters as well. So I mean, I got my chance. I started the season that year under him, and even my son went back on it about 3 weeks ago. He said, "Dad," he said, "why did you get dropped?" He said, "You guys were top of the league and you were unbeaten after 13 games." He said, "You won nearly every game." He says, and you were sort of 6 or 7 points clear." And he said, "Why did you get dropped?" I went, "I think I let a bad goal in against Reykjavik or something in Europe." And that, he'd made his mind up about me as a goalkeeper. I walked into his office, and this might have been the story you're talking about, Stephen. And he said, "Look," he said, "I think you're a great lad." He said, "But you're."
It's always a great way to start a conversation.
Yeah, it's a load of crap, that one, really, isn't it? I've used it a few times myself. He said, "But your goalkeeping really does give me the heebie-jeebies." He said at the same time, he said, "I've signed Rab Douglas. He's going to play this week." He said, "But," he said, "I'm going to give you a 3.5-year contract." And he said, "And don't argue about the money." He said that you're not getting any more money. And to be honest, it was an incredible 3.5-year deal. And I kind of walked out perplexed, to be honest, because he told me I was an average. I'll use the word average. He used worse. Told me I was average kid, but liked me, and then offered me, probably something that set me up for the rest of my life. And I think it was because he knew that Rob was actually cup tied, and it would come round with the League Cup that I would be in the team about 2 months later anyway. And that semi-final happened to be Rangers at Hampden. So you can imagine, having not played for 2 months, didn't play any under-21 games or reserve team games. The fixture list was just too busy. And then he said, right, obviously I had to then play against Rangers, and we were at Hampden, and we're all warmed up, and we're just about to go out in the tunnel, and Martin looked at me, and he looked at the rest of the lads. He went, "Look," he said, "Gouldy might be a bit rusty, so you best give him an early touch." Old firm game. But we went out. I think we won. We won 3-1, and Albert scored a penalty, and that got through to the final, and then that led on to his first trophy as a manager, and I played in that. And in the end, I won the treble as a football player. So as much as he didn't rate me, he believed in me in some fashion, however it may be.
One of the other interesting stories from that time was Alan Stubbs.
Yeah.
And his battle, again, for those that aren't aware, was diagnosed with testicular cancer during his time at Celtic. I think it was discovered after a routine drugs test post-match.
Yeah.
What was that like to have a fellow professional going through that pain group?
Yeah, I should be laughing, but Stubbsy was one of the main men in our dressing room. I love him to bits as a guy, and so for him to get, we'd also had one the previous year with Darren Jackson, who'd had a problem with his brain, and he was very, very lucky to survive that when they found it. But Stubbsy, he was lucky that it was caught. It literally came up. Initially they thought he'd been taking steroids of some kind because his testosterone levels were through the roof, and then obviously it transpired that it was testicular cancer. And the reason I'm laughing is because he got through it, and then he had another bout on it where he came back and he had his stomach. And that obviously, when you get secondary cancer, it tends to be a lot more serious. But I think the environment the lads created for Alan and everything we all went through, together with him, we used to call him One Nut because obviously he'd had one of his nuts removed, and there's that kind of banter that went on in the dressing room. And I can remember getting a phone call from him, and my wife has never forgiven me for it. I got a phone call from him one night, and he said, Gouldy, he said, "We're all out tonight." He said, "I've had my insurance money through. obviously he covered himself relatively well with critical care. He said, so he got a reasonable payout. He says, "We're going out tonight. We are going out." And I sort of turned around to the wife and went, Stubbs, he's recovered from cancer. Everything's great. As if we needed an excuse. The problem was when I rolled back in at 5 a.m, I neglected to remember that it was my son's first day at school the next day. And I didn't make it. I've got to be honest. And,
he won't remember.
Well, my son doesn't, but Alan doesn't remember it obviously either. But my wife remembers it.
I've got two other things before Stevie jumps back in.
Yeah.
And I forgot to bring it up when we were talking about the stopping the 10 in a row. But
yeah,
smell love, was that an actual real thing internally, or was that all just smoke and mirrors? There was a kind of a famous reference to smell the glove through that year, and people were trying to work it out. Was it a real thing, or did it just kind of get blown out of proportion?
Yeah, no, it got totally blown out of proportion, and we kind of we made a pact that we wouldn't say what it was, and it got
until now.
No, it's not until now because I actually came out and said it. There was a book written by a lad called Mark Greeley called The Inner Sanctum. And when we were talking about it, I brought the subject up, but it was that pathetic that we were coming out of Kilmarnock's ground, and there was literally a handprint on the wall, and it said "Smell the glove," right? And a lad called Tosh McKinley, who was our left back at the time, he just went like that, "Smell the glove," and it just became our catchphrase. So every time the media came to us, we go, "I smell the glove." And they thought it related to rather, even more sinister things. And it wasn't. It was just something we'd seen on a bloody wall, right, at a ground. And everyone just, even to the point I think we had T-shirts printed when we won the league, "Smell the glove." And they were all just going off their nuts about it. What does it mean? It was like a fraternity emblem, really.
And the other Celtic one before Stevie jumps back in is the I got to look down at my notes to get the headline right, which is Super Caley goes ballistic, Celtic are atrocious. Yeah. Now they're a good side now, but back then in the Scottish Cup, non-league.
No, they weren't. I think they were in the Scottish First Division at the time. They weren't non-league. Right. But it was a really unexpected result. Obviously, this is the nuances that you get in football, guys. Right. So we were supposed to play them on the Saturday, and there were hurricanes whistling through the stadium at Parkhead, and one of the big speakers up in the corner was waving. So the police deemed it unsafe. So we then went and played midweek. I think we played Hearts and got beat away from home. And you could feel the pressure building up, and then Hearts on the following weekend and got beat home, and then we had Inverness Caley Thistle turn up at Celtic on a Wednesday night, and I think they could sniff blood, and we were 2-1 down at half time. The dressing room was an absolute shambles at half time. Big Mark Viduka refused to go back out. Things had been said by coaches. It really did kick off massively. Then we won out, and we didn't quite manage to turn the game around. And I remember at 1:30 a.m, we were still at the stadium because we were being advised by security not to go outside because the supporters were still out there. And obviously wanted to say their piece, and it was a dangerous place. But in a way. In a way, it was kind of a good thing because it was the straw that broke the camel's back with John Barnes, and that was his last game in charge. And go on, sorry.
No, and then Kenny Dalglish comes in, and I was just really interested in that working relationship, or how that what that was like.
Well, Kenny had been his director of football, and I know for a fact that there was a period of time when Kenny thought that John was struggling with the team, and he said, "Right, I'm going to bring you an experienced coach in to help you. And he had Ray Harford, who was, had worked with Kenny at Blackburn when they were in the Premier League. So he was prepared to bring some sort of grey matter in to help John through. And John, from what I can gather, refused that help. And I think from that point forward, it was kind of Kenny was well, I'm trying to help you. You don't think you need that help. Let's see what happens. And in the end, John got the sack, and Kenny took over. And Kenny. Kenny was in charge for about 4 or 5 months. He was excellent. He's everything you'd expect from someone who'd managed and played at the highest level. Tremendous respect for him. That's not to say John wasn't. John wasn't a bad guy. He was just a very young coach at a very big football club, probably too early in his coaching career.
Well, John Barnes is one of my heroes, and I'm a little bit dirty on him because he's super active on Twitter. And during lockdown, I recreated his rap from the Italian 90 World in Motion. Yeah. And it kind of went viral. It's a sight to see. I don't know if you caught it on Twitter. But, maybe we'll drop it in the show notes. But
he's a tight little Liverpool top with the belly exposed. And it's real. You need to check it out, Gouldy.
It's an 88 crown paint actually that they lost to Wimbledon in. But it's I ruined it for the sake of recreating it. I'm still pissed off that he hasn't retweeted it, no matter how much Sam Wilkinson's tried to get that going. So maybe if you could retweet that might carry a little bit more weight, and we'll see if we can get him to.
Highly unlikely John Barnes will retweet anything of mine.
We'll let sleeping dogs lie.
Gouldy, I want a bit of a picture of your sort of star status when you were in your pomp at Celtic. Were you able to go to a mall or to the supermarket, or would you get mobbed, or would people recognise you everywhere you went, or was that just for the more frontline players in the team, the Henriks,
the ones with dreadlocks?
No. We were all, well recognisable. The national newspapers carried everything about us and everything we did. It was sometimes it was nice, like I said before. Other times it was more difficult. I had a couple of occasions where if you go into the wrong shop, you basically get told to walk back out and find somewhere else to shop.
Are those unwritten kind of rules? Do you just kind of find them by trial and error around that kind of sectarian aspect of Glasgow?
No, it could just be bad luck sometimes. You walk into the wrong place at the wrong time. It can be I remember being in a bar one night, and I had a couple of drinks anyway, and there was these 3 lads, and they were being really nice, and we were getting on well, and then all of a sudden they turned. It was pretty obvious that they were Rangers supporters. They turned pretty quickly. I had one occasion where we were having a new kitchen fitted in a house, and my wife was there when the washing machine was delivered, and it was pretty obvious that he didn't want to be in there. He realised whose house it was. We turned the washing machine on a couple of days later, and it flooded the kitchen because he refused to plumb it. I had another occasion like that where we were due to play Hearts in a really big game that year when we stopped 10, and at 2:00 in the morning, I think I had 3 police cars outside my house. I had police in the garden. I had people banging on the doors. I opened the doors. I had Daffy Duck boxer shorts on, right? I remember it. I'm at the door, and the police are there going, "Oh, you're being burgled." I'm looking around the house going, "No, I don't think I am, actually." and people would literally set your house up at 2:00 in the morning, and so the police came around.
Wow. Is it true that we'll talk about your Scottish international career in a bit, but is it true that when you got together that the Rangers and the Celtic players would sit separately and not really mingle?
No, it wasn't true at all. We were actually off the park, and as you go into those environments, and your professionalism has to kick in, we were pretty good. There was a couple of occasions that were directly after Old Firm games where the first couple of hours might have been a bit frosty on the Sunday, but generally we got on pretty well as a group.
Just sticking with Scotland, and we may as well head there now, Steve. France 98, and you talk about your call up to the squad. Were you on holiday or tour before you got called up there? And again,
No.
football anorak, goalkeeper anorak. So Andy Gorham went MIA, I think, and got called in for the squad. But were you with the Celtic supporters group?
Yeah, I was. I was in Jersey for 3 days, and it was just full on from what I can remember of it.
I can imagine if a player turns up in the supporters group, you're going to be well looked after the whole time that you're there.
Yeah, and then I got back. I remember getting back, and the day I got back, I got a phone call, and I think it was Jock Brown again. He was always giving me good news, Jock was, and it basically said, "You've been called up to the Scotland squad. Make sure you're ready for that call." Then I got the call from Craig, his brother, Craig Brown, and he said, "Yep, you need to fly out to Washington as soon as possible." So I literally packed my bags, went down to Glasgow airport, flew out to Washington, and these were the days like I had. I think there was 3 newspaper journalists running down the escalator trying to get the story as to what had happened to Andy, and I think he'd just gone out for a pint of milk like he used to and hadn't come back for a couple of days. And I just, from nowhere again, ended up, at World Cup finals, which was quite incredible, really.
Because had you mentioned earlier, so you'd been in a Scotland setup, I think, in the sort of early 90s when you were playing for Coventry. And then had you skipped out of the squad until you got recalled in 98, or had you kind of skirted around with it?
No. It's like anything. If you're in the first team playing football and you're playing well, you've got a chance of an international call up. So that was literally once I wasn't playing in the Premier League for Coventry City, and I'd kind of dropped down to try and get myself forward again. I lost that opportunity. But as soon as I was in the Celtic team and playing week in, week out, I was obviously then, considered ready to play, for my country.
And were there any overtures from South Africa? Because I gather you're eligible for them as well.
You've done your homework, haven't you? England came knocking as well, but I turned them down, to be honest. But no, My granddad was born in South Africa, in Durban, and there was a link there, and they did make an inquiry, but I'd already made the decision to play for Scotland, because that was my dad's side of the family and their links through Blantyre.
Gouldy, paint a picture for us of Jonathan Gould, the goalkeeper. You said your old man said you couldn't run enough to be a player. You've obviously gone on to have this incredible career. What were your strengths as a goalkeeper? How did you rise so high, and what were your weaknesses, if you had any?
Okay, I think my strength was my communication. I was a coach behind a back four, and I think that, and we can probably have a laugh about this, but I'm not going to. I think that helped me keep the ball away from me, because I knew how to coach that back four. All right, I worked so hard technically to be as good as I possibly could be. At 6'1", I was, even though I wasn't a quick runner, I had quick feet, if that makes sense. I've only got size 7.5 feet, so I often fall over. But I was really quick around my box. My footwork was and my agility, and I think also I had the ability to read the ball off a striker's foot. The minute he shaped in a certain way, I was already sort of going in the direction where that ball might be. So I think my anticipation levels were higher, as were my concentration levels. I think my weaknesses. This is strange, because when I first went into the Premier League, I wasn't afraid of anything, and I was kind of well known for coming for crosses. And all of a sudden, you miss a couple, and you read the newspapers, and that became my weakness, which was really quite strange. But yeah, no, that's probably me as a goalkeeper. I think I technically. I pride myself on that, and I still pride myself as a goalkeeping coach now, making sure technically the goalkeepers that I work with are proficient. Because if in that one instant at the highest level, when the ball's travelling as fast as it does nowadays, if you're technically not capable of getting yourself into the position to make that save, and then you can't carry the technique through, you're going to struggle. You really are.
How important is dealing with high pressure situations and having the mental discipline to block out the noise? Is that, do you rate that as a necessary attribute to rise to the top?
I actually think I think the noise helps top players. I think that's part of your adrenaline, and I think the hardest scenario is actually when there's not so much going on, and therefore it's easier to wander. And that's when you have to have triggers. I used to have triggers where if there was a corner at the other end, I'd go into the back of my goal. I'd have a drink. I'd walk to the penalty spot, and I'd say, right now I'm switching on again to the fact that they might have a counter attack. So I personally thrived on the adrenaline rush of big crowds, and my old man used to, when I was pre-season, my old man used to say, you're one of the worst pre-season goalkeepers I've ever worked with, and it was literally because it's a pre-season game. It doesn't matter, but my attitude was, when it really mattered, that's when I wanted to be on it.
You talk about working with your dad. So he was in charge at Coventry when you were there.
Yeah.
Was it hard to separate the father-son working relationship when you were playing for him?
Not really. Not when I was playing. No, that was easy. It's when he didn't pick me. That's when it got difficult.
In a training session, are you, and he's barked something, you turn around and go, fuck off, gaffer, and then being like, shit.
No. I would never have shown it. I would never have really shown any manager that sort of disrespect anyway. Never did. In respect of that, my father and I, we had probably one of the greatest moments a father and son could have in football, right? So he rang me up on the Saturday. He said, Steve Ogrizovic's next is bad. You're going to be playing. And you're talking about, between two beers. And my debut, therefore, was going to be against Liverpool. So I was sat there at home at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I turned around to my wife and I went, get me a Budweiser out the fridge quick. Had a Budweiser, calmed my nerves. I went, get me another one. Had a couple of Budweisers, and then got someone.
Should have had a Dugges. Probably would have done you better.
Yeah. Got to the game. John Barnes is your hero. That's who I was playing against. There was a really good Liverpool side, and we won 5-1, right, at home to Liverpool. One of the biggest maulings they've ever had, like, for a long time. And I can just remember. I remember walking off, and the Spion Coppers, as it was called at Coventry. I remember walking off and seeing my dad, and having this hug with my dad. I mean, could you put that into words? That kind of that opportunity and that experience is it's phenomenal. Really, it's brilliant.
Yeah, awesome. Mm-hmm. But then he resigned, right, after a while.
See, that was the other side of it. We got beat 5-1 by QPR, and he resigned. And I was that day. I remember we got off the coach after the result back at Brighton, was a training ground, and he looked at me and he went, "Yeah, I don't think Phil's going to play you." Phil Neal was the assistant coach. He said, "I don't think Phil's going to play you on." I think we've had Oldham on Tuesday or Wednesday night. And I said, why not? He says, well, I don't think he thinks that the fact that I've resigned is going to help your, mental state and everything like that. So, I'd had conversations with my dad 3 weeks before about signing a new contract. So you can imagine how I felt. He's resigned. We've got beat 5-1. I'm losing my place, and now my contract's, in doubt. And he rang me up on the Sunday, bold as brass. He said, "Oh, do you fancy coming out for Sunday lunch?" And I went, "No, I don't actually." I obviously did, but that was a strange moment as a father son. The other one we got, which was incredible. So I was at West Brom with him, and he got sacked by West Brom for not getting promotion. We'd finished seventh in the League One as it was then, and I was at the ground. And Tim Exeter, who was the fitness coach, came and found me in the gym. And he says, "Oh, your dad wants to speak to you." He says, "I think there's a few things gone on." I went, "Oh, God, here we go." So I walked into his office. He says, "Look, I've been sacked." He says, "I've got my check." He says, "The problem is," he said, "they've taken my car off me and I need you to give me a lift home." So that was the Fiat Punto coming into force again. That was.
Gouldy, so let's jump back. Your time at Celtic comes to an end, and then I think you moved to Hereford, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I went to Preston North End for two and a half years.
But coming from some of those super highs at Celtic, was it challenging to drop, without being disrespectful, to drop down into kind of that lower echelon of professional football?
No. Because when you start there, you always appreciate it. So I started at Halifax, right? And we never won a game in hardly ever when I played for them for 2 years. So you then have the fortune and you know, there's elements of what you're capable of takes you to a high level. So when you come back down, you still love the game. That's why I started playing. You know, you don't play for money, you don't play for fame, you play to win football matches, and you play because you love it. And so I actually consider the 15 games I played at Hereford, I loved every minute of it, and had a fabulous rapport with the supporters there. My dad had played for Hereford in the 70s. You know, I played for Hereford, and then I went back last year. My son played against Hereford, so the 3 Goulds all to play at Edgar Street. You know, 3 generations. So the answer to your question is no. Loved every minute of playing for every club that I was lucky enough to put their shirt on for.
We've touched on some pretty big names so far: Henrik Larsen, Mark Viduka, John Barnes. You spent 4 years in the Premier League at Coventry. Who were the other? I've got Paul Gascoigne in my notes. Did you play a little bit against Heather? Were there any other players who really are top that you have memories of playing against?
Well, goodness me, the class of '92. The Man United boys.
You know, right?
Yeah. They were all coming through. I remember Cantona. We were, you know, I think it was my first away game in the Premier League, and we went to Old Trafford. And you look at their team, and you had Ryan Giggs, Cantona, Hughes. You know, had Pallister and Bruce at the back, and I remember Dad saying to me, he said, well, he didn't say it to me, he said it in front of the team at Old Trafford. He goes, "Right, if you can keep these lads out for the first 20 minutes, we have got a right chance here," because we were in good form. We'd just beaten Liverpool, we'd beaten Villa, our local rivals. We were in good nick. He says, for 20 minutes, keep them out. Big 20 minutes. So came in at half time, and we're 2-0 down. And he looked at me, and to be fair, right, Giggs had got one and curled one into the top right-hand corner. Mark Hughes had swiveled and smashed one with them big chunky thighs into the bottom left-hand corner. I didn't have a cat and hell's chance. And he turned around to me, he said, "What did I say?" He said, "First 20 minutes, we needed to keep them out." And I went, "Well, Giggsy's was 23." I says, "and Hughes's was 25. I said, "I did all right for the first 20 minutes. I said, "It was the 5 minutes after." We ended up getting beat 5-0, and yeah, they were a great side. They were Cantona, my word. You know, he was a poet on the pitch, not just off it.
I always wonder about like opposition playing Barcelona at the moment, and you're facing Messi and someone like that, and it's like in the team talk, are you trying to talk shit on him? Like, he's not that good, you know. We just got to work him on his right hand side, you know. In '92 against Man United, are you trying to like talk yourselves up and say that they're not as good as everyone else?
Giggsy on that right foot, and we'll be fine.
We're fine. Yeah. No, look, the funniest story I can tell you about that was at the World Cup with Craig Brown, right? So we opened the World Cup at Stade de Paris against Brazil, right? So, you know, it's incredible to open the World Cup for any team, and we're there in our kilts, walking across, and you come back into the change room. You couldn't warm up on the pitch because of the ceremony that was going on. So every warm up was done inside. And I remember, so the first time we lined up in the tunnel, right? And so you had we were on the right hand side. You had Brazil, right, on the left hand side. Ronaldo, Rivaldo, all of them. And I looked at our lot. I remember looking at our lot, and we're there. We've got white shorts on. We've got the skinniest white legs you've ever seen on the continent. And then you look over, and you've got these Brazilians, right? Now Ronaldo wasn't. This is the older Ronaldo. Ronaldo wasn't tall. But when you looked over there and you saw these lads, they were like Adonis's, bronze. He looked massive. They were incredible specimens, right? Without going too far about this. Anyway, Craig Brown literally walked, and Jackie McNamara tells the story best, but Craig Brown walked round the corner. He stopped in his tracks, right? And he looked at them and he looked at us and went, "Look at them lads. They are shitting themselves." Oh dear me, they didn't. And Ronaldo was immense. My goodness.
Just on Scotland, how was it? I mean, you played twice, if I'm not mistaken, Lithuania and Australia.
Yeah.
Cole Tinkler, we chatted to him in the build up to this, and Tinks was saying again after the Brazil game, I think it was at the Olympics, he was a bit down on his luck, having not got on the pitch, and he retold the story to us about you sort of saying, "Fuck me, like." I sat on the bench 70 times for Scotland and only got to play twice. How frustrating was it to play, or to not play so many times for your country?
Yeah, I'd like to have played more, but it just didn't present itself. Neil Sullivan was the goalkeeper. Andy Gorham was in and out. He kind of left. Jim Leighton was at the end of his career. I've got no regrets in respect of that, and. I mean, even to sit on the bench, I think it was 30 odd times in the end, but I loved every minute. And I even got a call up late in my career when we had England in the playoffs to get to the Euros, and then we had Holland in the playoffs to get to the Euros, and didn't make either of them, but they were fantastic occasions, and it was you sit on the bench. I remember sitting on the bench at the Holland game. I had I had Graham Alexander was next to me. He was my teammate, and he'd also obviously with Preston and not just Scotland, and Big Rab Douglas was in goal, and he was shipping them in. Not that he was throwing them in, he was just shipping them in. And we lost 6-0. And I remember Graham Alexander and I just saying to each other, "Don't really want to come on now, do you?" And laughing. There's just great times, really.
Gouldy, let's take you to 2005. So the end of your career, you went from Halifax to Bristol, and then you come back to New Zealand. Was it always the plan to come back to New Zealand? You were out here in '89. Were you always thinking at some point, I'd like to go back, or how did that work out?
Yeah, I think I had such a good time at Napier the first time, and my wife and I came back for our wedding anniversary in '93. And I don't know if you appreciate this, lads, but you see when you walk out the house in New Zealand on a cold winter's night, and you get that wood burning smell, right? And it's just this smell; it never leaves you. And I literally used to dream that I was having that smell, and I just always loved the country, and so in 2005, my wife and I decided that we'd do something quite radical in respect of how you'd end your footballing career, and spoke to Colin Stone, and he said, "Well, look, there's an opportunity as an academy manager to come and set up an academy in Hawke's Bay. Would you fancy it?" And I obviously took that opportunity.
When you first came out in '89, did you know anything about New Zealand at all?
When I first came here?
Yeah, in '89, yeah.
Nothing. Just that it was a long way away. And the TWA Airlines were one of the few that flew out here at the time.
So first impressions of when you arrive in Napier and you see that, are you just thinking this is heaven on earth? Did you fall in love immediately, or did you have to wait until that burning wood smell?
No, I stayed... we had a lad called John Simmons that looked after us. He was someone that went round all the pubs and delivered all the beer, and he took us for 2 or 3 weeks. So that was our settling in period, was Rheineck, which was brilliant. And talking of our beers, lads. So that was.
You should have had a. You should have had a Dugges.
Oh dear me. So, and then I stayed with a lady called Anne Hornblows, now Anne Garrett, and she's since then I think she's probably had about 50 or 60 footballers stay with her as like the first port of call when you arrive in New Zealand. So I was lucky to spend 9 months at Anne's house, and you know, you get a pretty good feeling about Napier, as you said, the minute you fly down and you come over the ranges and it all spans out in front of you. So yeah, it was, and I think what helped as well, it's a great football club, Napier City Rovers. You know, the volunteer group, that there was the old boys that were there. There were a lot of former pros that had made similar kind of moves overseas. We had some really good young Kiwis. Jason New was one that I remember really well. You know, obviously went on to play for New Zealand, and Darren Jackson, not Darren Jackson, Chris Jackson, I think the Celtic. Yeah, Chris Jackson was playing with us as well. So we had a mix of old heads, young Poms, and young Kiwis, and it was a really good dressing room.
Was there ever any thought to doing anything other than football? Was there ever a point where you considered not going into coaching or goalkeeper coaching? That did anything else ever pop up as a possibility, or was it always going to be this?
Not really. I think it was always going to be this. If I'd been anything else in my life, it would have been a teacher. So really, to come away from football coaching wouldn't have made any sense. I've never been one to force myself into situations that they've been presented, and I really enjoyed what we did at Hawke's Bay United with the academy for 3 or 4 years there. I thought we had it going pretty well, actually, and we kind of cleared a pathway for youngsters in the region, and we'd set a policy, Stephen, that where we bought young under 20s Kiwis, because of my involvement with the national teams, we tried to bring young Kiwis that weren't going to play at your Auckland Cities and your Waitakeras at the time, and we gave them opportunities at Hawke's Bay United. You know, I debuted Ian Hogg at the age of 16, Cole Peverley. They weren't getting games even. You know, Phil Edgington, people like that. And I'm actually quite proud of that work. You know, we had Tom Biss, who I thought should have played more times for the Phoenix. I thought he had some ability, and yeah, I've probably been a bit of a champion for the local kids. I think the provinces. It's proven, isn't it, that some of the best rugby players for New Zealand have come out of the smaller provinces, and I believe that there are some gems even now. There's the more gems in Hawke's Bay as well.
At what point did you decide that Michael Frischnet was going to be one of those gems?
When I decided that Perry Cotton was a bit old, to be honest. Hold on. Michael's a lovely lad. All right, he's a great lad. So don't start that.
Yeah. By the way, he's so loyal to you. He would not give us a single thing to work with for this podcast. So that connection obviously has stood the test of time.
Yeah, no, Michael did a great job, and he's a super guy. I mean, we all make dubious calls. There's a couple out there that Stephen I know he remembers for a fact, and I'll see if he brings them up as we go along.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that in the intro.
No, it'll come up.
Jeremy Brocky was another one who you worked with, who's commented that you might have made a little cheeky play to get him back now at the sort of end of his career. Have you tried to get to the Bay recently?
He blanked the message, so I'm not.
Oh, he saw it.
He's seen it. Don't worry, he's seen it.
Yeah, I might send him another one saying, "Remember your roots."
Yeah. Sam Messam's knocking about as well.
Yeah. Okay. See, I knew we were going to get to that point, right? And I suppose, it's the story about Sam Messam is a really funny one, or I don't know. But I was looking for a big centre forward for Hawke's Bay United, and I walked into the Novotel in Hamilton and saw this big 6'4" giant standing in front of me, and I literally went to him and went, "Do you play football by any chance?" Because he was odds on he was going to be a bloody rugby player. So I said to him, "Where did I get to?" I said, "Oh, he says, "Yeah, I do. I play for Cambridge," and I was working with a lad called Matt Chandler at the time as well. And I said, "Oh, is he any good?" And Matt sort of, he's okay. He's quick, he's strong, and so I got him down, and he played a pre-season game for us, and he was brilliant. I know that might not be what the sort of words you'd associate with Sam, right? And I just thought he had pace. I was probably not long out of the UK where big centre forwards were in vogue still, and I thought he fitted the bill. And to be fair to him, I think he scored 7 goals in that season for us, and I just thought his flying 15 was quicker than any of the other All Blacks, from what I heard.
His brother is Liam Messam, who's played 50-odd games for the All Blacks.
Yeah.
Incredible genetics, that family. I mean, Sam Messam, like you say, an absolute Adonis, and he was quick too. So I could kind of see the argument is that, like, if you're going to be bringing him on, it's probably going to be the last few minutes. Maybe you're trying to pinch something, put it in the mixer. The big man might rise up and get a flick on or something. So, hey, we can live with it.
He wasn't, technically he wasn't a great footballer, but he was. He did a good job, and he was good for me. I had a lot of faith in him, and sometimes people need a bit of faith, don't they?
Jumping back to your dad, he came out and assisted you during your time at Hawke's Bay United. Was that always on the cards, or was that something that you'd asked him to come and help you out through that? Did that experienced head help you through your initial coaching stages?
No, it wasn't something that was preordained. No, it's because Dad and I had sort of kind of not fiery, but we clash now and then about things. No, he came out the second year. He'd been really poorly. We thought we were going to lose him at one point, and he came out the second year. And he did some coaching with the academy kids, and he was absolutely brilliant with them, and they really enjoyed it. And I said to him, look, and I think we were going into year 3 with the franchise. And I said, do you fancy coming out and being my assistant? I said, I've got Matt Chandler was going to do the academy, to take over from the role I was doing. And he said, yeah, I'd love to. And we just got beaten by Roger's team. I don't know, Stephen, were you involved with Roger when they played over at Lynx?
No, yeah, it was, yeah, yep.
Well, you beat us 4-2, and Roger was on the touchline. It was the last game of the season, and it was a decent game. And anyway, I remember Dad standing next to me, and he says, "I've got a list of the players that you should keep here at Hawke's Bay United, and here they are." And there was 2 names on it. So
who were the names? Do you remember?
I remember Sam Jenkins was one of them.
Jenkins,
and I think Graham Fife was the other, because we'd already bought him over as. So I thought, and to be fair, it was a little bit of a harsh list, that one, I thought. But that was really part of the remit. Even then, was to keep you were lucky if you had 11 players the same the next season at a provincial franchise. It was really quite tough sometimes.
Yeah. Gouldy, one of my enduring memories of you is running battles with Carlos Bizzetti, who was the Fijian coach during the period you were working with the New Zealand 20s and the Olympic side, I think 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
One of the questions I was always, this is my opportunity to ask it now, but did you deliberately ever go out to try and wind him up, knowing that he was head loss, and that when he was head loss, that would filter through to his team on the pitch?
Yeah, it's probably absolutely. You knew that if you were getting under his skin, he wasn't focusing on what his job was. I don't want to sort of name drop here, but we played Leeds a couple of times, obviously over the last 2 seasons, and you've got Marco Bielsa, who's a really fantastic guy. And he sat there on his little stool, and he would wind me up just by sitting on that stool. And so I would continue verbally. They would have 4 coaches up and down, up and down. You're only allowed 1 coach to stand up.
Second one can stand up, say what he says to the coach, sits back down. These 4 would be running like a riot around a technical box that was no bigger than the one at Auckland City, right? And I would constantly be saying to the 4th official, look what they're doing, look what he's doing. I would just try and put them out their stride as much as possible. Because that's, if a manager loses his focus, his team is generally going to get affected by that. And I probably, if I'm honest, Seamus, I probably learned that from the fact I got lost my focus on numerous occasions. Well, and it becomes a deflection almost, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my point, is that, like, we said this about Danny Robinson, nicest guy off the pitch. Then when you put Robbo on the pitch, he just flipped. And I felt sometimes your technical area persona was a little bit like that as well. And I don't know whether that's just the highly competitive nature. And again, talking to you, some of your, accumulated experiences, old firm derbies, I can't imagine you can be, you've got to have that kind of persona and that bravado about you when you're in some of those high pressure environments, right?
Yeah, I think, and that was the thing that probably didn't learn quickly enough when I first came to New Zealand. And I'm mindful of it now that Kiwis are really humble, and I think you have to behave in a certain way. And I think coming out of the English game where you've got big crowds, and therefore the focus is on the football field as opposed to on a coach when there's not so many people watching the game. And I think you've got to learn restraint when you're a coach, especially a head coach.
And so we've mentioned you were involved with New Zealand teams, I think 07, 08. Was that part of the plan when you came out to New Zealand? Did that happen by accident as well? Just kind of an opportunity presented itself that you were?
Yeah, it just happens through relationships. Got to know Stu Jacobs really well. Admire him now as a coach as I did then, and you get taken on board. Same with Ricky. It's just creating relationships and being passionate about what you do, I think.
Okay, so Gouldy, when you come back to New Zealand, how quickly did you link up with the Phoenix? And was that kind of always the goal, the one professional team in New Zealand you wanted to get in that setup?
No, it wasn't. I remember I was driving down St George's Road in Havelock, and I remember it coming up that Ricky was after some help at the Phoenix. And I rang him up, and I knew him, obviously. And I said, look, I think I've got something that to offer. I've been a head coach, so I think you, as a head coach, when you then drop into a role as an assistant stroke goalkeeping coach, you understand some of the challenges that head coaches, and you can protect them also from certain aspects. And I just said to Ricky, I'd love to come and have an interview. And that was as simple as that. Went down, interviewed with him and Tony Pignata, and then I took the role on with Luciano Tranni, who I've remained very good friends with ever since.
And there was a famous occasion. Well, I say this a lot. I got hammered for it this week. I think this is reasonably famous. Yeah. But you were called into playing duty when you were assistant coach / GK coach for a match against Sydney United, Sydney FC.
Sydney FC, yeah. We had I can't remember where the injuries came from.
I can tell you. Pasty was expecting his first child.
That was it, and it was we were away in Palmerston. So, Mark went to the birth of his child, and I think Big Crowther was second choice at the time, and he played against. I can actually remember being in the far corner at was it the FMG Stadium Arena, wasn't it? I think it was called there. Yeah. And Crowther went down injured, and I actually at that minute he went down injured, I thought, oh no, I'm going to regret this.
How old were you at that stage?
I was 42 at the time.
And I think you were, if you had have got on, you would have been the oldest player to have played in the A-League.
Yeah.
There must have been a few in that Phoenix camp who were just hoping,
Yeah,
just wanting to get you in there.
Yeah, only because they didn't think Reece was any good.
We had a situation at Melville last year where, I don't know if you know Neil Mucha. He must be what, 50, other side of 50
plus,
and Melville lost their RGK who went overseas. So Mooch became the RGK, and every game I wasn't playing, and I'd go and I'd be like, please, I'd love to see an injury. I'd love to see an injury. I want to get Mooch in there. And then he ended up playing about 4 games at the end of the season as a 50-year-old. He did a decent job.
Look, it's a fun fact, but so today, I hate time stamping the podcast, but today is a year to the day that Napier City Rovers beat Melville in the Chatham Cup final last year. Yeah. And I think early doors in that game, similar situation. Max Tommy, the goalkeeper for Melville, got injured or went down for treatment, and I'm sitting next to Mooch on the bench, and Mooch is like, fuck me, please do not come off the field. E2 or whatever he was in the Chatham Cup final would have been incredible. But to his credit, Max Tommy got back up, and unfortunately the trophy went down to the Hawke's Bay.
So Herbert leaves, Merrick takes over. Is that a seamless transition? You're just keeping that job?
Well,
you must have an inside track from somewhere, Mr. Holloway, right?
Well, we've jumped around because you've gone to Perth prior to that, right?
Yes, I had a year in Perth with Ian Ferguson.
Which
where we got
I
to the
think
grand final. Yeah.
Well, I think the Perth stuff is interesting in itself because you played. How many Old Firm derbies did you play against Ian Ferguson?
I played. Oh goodness me, probably 14 or 15 against Ian. And that was do you know what? That was an amazing thing. I was in my house, and the phone went at 12 o'clock, and we were booked to go to back to the UK. And I'm never up late. I'm usually in bed by now, actually, lads. And I was up at 12 o'clock at night, and the phone went at home, and I pick it up, and he went, "Oh, is that Jonathan Gould?" Yeah. It's Ian Ferguson here, and I went, "Yeah." He says, "Do you fancy coming out and being my goalkeeping coach at Perth Glory?" He says, "You've worked with Danny Vukovic, and that's where the connection is." And I had 5 or 10 minutes with him on the telephone. I put the phone down, and I went to my missus. I went, "I'm going to Perth."
By the way.
So we talked about it, and it was obviously already a done deal in my head. I spent. The plan was to move out, but the first 5 or 6 months were horrendous. There, we were in the bottom 3. We were talking about being sacked, and it was really quite average. And then we kind of had an epiphany moment as a group of coaches. We seemed to then sort our roles out, and Ian went to work. He was brilliant. Man management was absolutely brilliant. It was like he was back out on the field as captain of Rangers, and he was orchestrating everything. And I think we then went something like won 11 out of the next 13 to get to the grand final. It was a remarkable run, and got beat by a dodgy penalty from Bessop Barisha, and the Mr. Referee was Mr. Gillette, who is actually now refereeing over in the UK in the Championship, and I remind him every time I see him.
We've got it on reasonable authority that you rode a scooter to work every day in Perth. Is that accurate?
Yeah, every day. Great fun. A little Vespa. I used to get abused by all the big V8s holding up traffic, driving around Perth.
No.
So now you can take over, Steve, with your Ricky Uni.
I feel like we were just about to crack onto something because he said that my sources are good. So I feel like we were getting somewhere. What was the transition? Yeah. What was the Herbert to Merrick situation? What happened there?
I made a mistake. When Ernie was appointed, I should have got in the car and gone straight down and met him, and I didn't go down. And we'd had a few issues in and around the academy. How that was supposed to work between us and Team Wellington, and I think word got to Ernie that I was part of the problem, and it took me probably the best part of 7 months to earn Ernie's trust as to the personality and the coach that I really was. But once that had sort of corrected, really enjoyed it under Ernie. He's you watch these top coaches work, and you watch them do shape and pattern of play, and the best in the world are absolutely nail those sessions. And Ernie on his day, and Ricky again. Ricky was one of the best I've ever seen. And you bear in mind that I've worked with some really good managers. More lately, Tony Pulis, who as a coach, he knows how to set a team up. Not always to delight the supporters, but Ricky and Ernie were brilliant at that on the training field.
At pattern of play, so Ricky was one of the best in the world at setting the team
shape,
up and
setting the team up shape. Everything you guys witnessed at the World Cup in 2010 was everything that Ricky Herbert was absolutely outstanding at, and I mean that. And again, I'm good friends with Ricky, but what I saw then, and what I saw at the Phoenix when we went on that incredible unbeaten run at home, I think it was 24, 26 games. He knew how to set a team up, and the best managers in the world do that.
Staying on Ricky then, was there ever an opportunity, or was it ever on the horizon for you to join the coaching staff in 2010 and head across to the World Cup in South Africa?
No, and it's never been I've never set agendas, to be honest, Seamus. So I knew that Clint was well in there. He'd been there a long time, and so no, I never even considered it.
And so, Jonathan, how did the transition go? So you went back to the UK after your stint with Phoenix. That happened quite quickly. Was that a difficult decision to make?
Not really. It was difficult to leave the Phoenix because it still is a fabulous club, and I got a lot of respect for the owners there and how they've maintained that place. Rob Morrison, Henry Tate, and all the guys that are behind it. That story was remarkable because I've got a little tin shed out the back here that my dad always stays in when he comes to visit. It's one of those unconsented places, right? that you tend to have in Kiwi land. And we were sat in the barn watching Liverpool against Wimbledon in the FA Cup in 2015. They drew each other in the third round, which was ironic in itself. And Dad turned around to me. He says, he said, Tony Pulis is he's looking for a goalkeeping coach. And I said, oh, okay. I said, have you got his number? He says, yeah. So I said, all right, give me his number. So I texted him. I said, dear Tony, because I'd worked with Tony when he was at Bristol Rovers and a young coach. I said, dear Tony, if you fancy a goalkeeping coach, I've got a good half volley, good experience in the game, give me a shout. Right? Simple as that. Anyway, 3 weeks later, I was sat in this room where I am now, and he goes, do you still fancy the job? I hadn't been interviewed for it, right? He'd obviously gone through a process at West Brom, and I went, do I? So literally then it took 2 to 3 weeks. I went and saw Ernie. Ernie was absolutely brilliant. He said, you've got to take that opportunity. It took me 2 to 3 weeks to get my contract sorted out. And the next thing I knew, I was in the Premier League coaching, which was, and we obviously kept West Brom up that year and went on to have probably 3 really good years with West Brom.
I've got a quote from an article, I think, around when you left, which was the hardest, this is your words, the hardest thing I've ever had to do was knock on his door to tell him that I had the opportunity to go to West Brom. Yeah. Is that factually accurate?
Yeah, actually it is, because go back to that relationship that I'd had to build with Ernie, then to come out the other side, and we had a really good season that first season, and he'd sort of become a mentor. When you spend a lot of time with Ernie, you get to know the person and as well as the coach. So yeah, to be really honest with him, and we were flying at the time. I think we were third, second. We then went. We think we beat the Jets at Hutt Park, or wherever, the Hutt Stadium. And we were going really well, and none of the lads knew until I actually walked out that day to catch a flight back to the UK, because I couldn't afford for it to come out this end at the West Brom end, because it was obviously it was, you know, contracts and the like over there had to be sort of kept under wraps.
Because one of the themes that's come through from chatting to people in preparation is just how highly they hold you in regard. So in terms of the working relationship with the goalkeepers at the time, how challenging was that to kind of let them know, hey, look, lads, I'm off?
No, there were tears. There were genuine tears. I think, you know, Mossy was playing pretty well at the time. Mark had sort of kind of come towards the end of his career. Had you know, a young Ollie Sale in there that we were trying to push through the ranks. You know, goodness me, I remember Ollie put in a performance against Brazil out in the Panda Cup, not about 6 months prior to that. A performance I've never seen the like of from a 17, 18-year-old. Absolutely outstanding. We drew 0-0. I think they had 31 shots or something, and he was brilliant. So you invest. You don't just invest your coaching time. You invest a lot of emotion when you're involved in football, because you want people to succeed. And I'd had a period of 6 years, you know, with that hiatus of Perth, and so it was really difficult to leave.
It's quite a transient sort of occupation, football coach. You, at a moment's notice, you go to Perth or back to UK. Is that difficult on the family situation?
Yeah.
Are those factors that you have to consider now more than when you were playing, and is that hard to make?
When your kids get a little bit older, it can be a bit easier. I think there's some of the stresses. I was talking to my wife about it today, and what becomes difficult is, no, it's not difficult. It's that's the wrong word. What makes it harder is that you don't get your choice of what you want to do at weekends. And so when you're living in somewhere like New Zealand, where weekends can be fantastic and they're free, you know, certain elements of life in this country are free. You go back to the UK and you know, let's be honest, you've got 2 games a week. Your Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday or Wednesday, then your Saturday or your Sunday, and your travel, and the traffic's horrendous in the UK. Even with bloody COVID, it was a nightmare when no one was on the road. You're still getting traffic jams, and that's what probably makes you tired, mentally tired, is the fatigue in and around the demands of the job, added to the stress that, you know, and this is the thing about franchise football in New Zealand and franchise football in Australia. You can't get relegated.
Yeah.
So you know, really,
yeah.
Is there any pressure? I don't think there is. I used to hear some of the players at the Phoenix complain about the fact that they were going away and having to spend time away from their families in Sydney. Well, we were staying in the Crown Plaza at Coogee Bay. That was not a problem. That wasn't the Holiday Inn on the roundabout just outside Stoke to go and play a football match. This was Coogee Bay. You know, you could walk down to Bondi and see Surf Rescue live if you wanted to. You know, there's different demands, obviously, in different countries, and I think you appreciate the good and the bad in both, but the pressure that builds in and around relegation in the UK. I spent 3 years at West Brom, and the chairman's remit was for us to finish 17th. 17th was one place above the relegation zone. That's all he wanted to do, because he knew it guaranteed his club somewhere between 100 and 140 million pounds.
So staying on that then, I mean, obviously you've got great experience in around the New Zealand National League. Does it need promotion, relegation? Does it need to be linked to the clubs? Is the current format not working?
God, what shall I say here?
I've got you at 10:10. You know, it's late at night. We've gone for an hour and a half. I might get a little bit of truth.
You get a bit of truth. You probably should have had a few of the Dugges.
I'm probably going to get a rollicking when I get into bed for being this late. What am I going to say? No, I'm going to tell you the truth. What I genuinely feel, and it's probably, you know, you talk about experiences, Stephen. the best format of football I ever witnessed was out in Perth and in the national leagues in Australia. Right, so Perth, you've got what 1.6, 1.8 million people. You've got around 14 national Premier League clubs. So if we played on a Sunday at Perth Glory, on a Saturday I could turn up at Perth FC, which was one of the clubs there, or I could turn up at Western Knights, and at 11 o'clock I could watch their under-18s play. At 1 o'clock I would watch their reserves play, which was generally their, maybe their 22, 23-year-olds. At 3 o'clock I watched their first team play. So for 6 hours, right, you've got football at a club where by the end of that 6 hours, every single member of that club is watching the two teams play. It's a fabulous model. I think somewhere it's a lot harder here in New Zealand. It's one of the hardest countries I think that there is in the world to get football right. But I do think it's got to go back to club based.
Okay, that was an easy answer. I don't think there's any controversy in that.
No, there isn't.
Just staying on that. So the position you've come back to is I think it was the technical director.
Director of football? Yeah.
Director of football. I was talking to the old man about this the other night. I mean, he works at Melville at a club with similar challenges, and he's saying that in this COVID environment, a lot of their grant money and seed sponsorship and things has dried up, and financially it's very testing. Yeah. Is that the same at the Bay? Is it a tough job to come into with the challenges that the current environment presents?
Yeah, I think what your dad's spot on. What it's presented is that when you bring players into a region, you've got to have jobs. You've got to have good accommodation for them. So I think at the moment, a lot of them are reticent to leave the areas they're actually based in because of the uncertainty. So let's go back to really what this league is about, and should we therefore be promoting what we have on our doorstep? Now, when I first came to Hawke's Bay and I took over from Perry, we had youngsters, but I don't think we'd had that development from those 11-year-olds through to 15 and 16. So I don't think the young ones were ready to be exposed at National League level, and that was pretty obvious by the fact I think we won 2 games in that season. We were not ready, and I think if you look at it now, it's how are these franchises going to set up for this year that make it a worthwhile competition. We've got 14 games. You've got under 20s cycles coming up. We really probably should be putting as many under 20s in the leagues as we can, in these teams that we can, and playing them. There's got to be a purpose somewhere. It's really difficult. I don't think it's a simple answer. But I think it's this year in particular will be as hard as any for provincial clubs to really set themselves up to be able to knock down the door of first and second.
Yeah, it is going to be a challenging year. What exactly is your role going to be? Are you going to be involved with coaching the National League side, or is it more of an oversight role?
Yeah, it's a bit more of an oversight. Bill Robertson's always done a fantastic job at Napier City Rovers. You mentioned the Chatham Cup this year. Chris Greatholder had previously had a stint at Hawke's Bay United and done pretty well with them, leading, following Matt Chandler and then leading into Brett Angels. So my role is at the moment has been to take some of the onus off recruiting players for them. Making sure that we've got certain things in place for players, and also then I'll do the goalkeepers and be a bit of that grey matter if they want to lean on me for anything. I spoke to them. I said, look, probably better off in the stand where I can get an overview for you, and that's what I used to do for No, I didn't, unfortunately. But I am better off there. I remember Alan Jones. You guys will know Alan, and he talks about Graham Mack. So he says, young coaches, need that experience, and so that's probably what I'll be given. We've got a young lad called Oscar Mason, who's come through the system here as a goalkeeper, and he's well fancied in the 17s. So I'm going to spend some time working with him and Richard Gillespie. I'm going to have an experienced one and a young one, which I think will be cool for both of those two. Right? Yeah.
Gouldy, are you a better goalkeeping coach or head first team coach? And what is your dream job?
I've probably done my dream job, having been goalkeeping coach in the Premier League. Worked with Ben Foster for those 3 years was brilliant. One of the best goalies I'll probably ever witness. So I think the answer to that is I'm better as a specialist in what I know best. I lived in a house on Royal Wellington Golf Course when I was at the Phoenix, and there was a guy there, and he I rented the other side of his house, and he was like in his 70s. Name was Gary. I can't remember his second name, which is rude of me, but he gave me some advice when I went to him, and he just said, "Look," he said, if you're a specialist at something, stay in your specialist field. That's what you should do. He says the minute you step out of that, you're likely to expose yourself. And I've taken his advice over the last, it's probably since I left Hawke's Bay United as head coach. That's what I've been doing for 11 years.
Shay, I guess we're specialist podcasters now, so let's stay in our lane, eh?
Let's not focus on what we do.
Too carried away with everything else.
Before we wind up, Gouldy, just how hard is the championship on clubs? You're really fighting to get into that top tier. How, you mentioned Bielsa and Leeds and the documentary that came out a couple of years ago, kind of charting their progress and their failure to get there. They've got there this season. How challenging is that environment to operate in?
Oh, it's the hardest league. It's the hardest. You've got You've got all these teams that are coming down from the Premier League with parachute payments. So if they've been in the Premier League for 4 or 5 years, they're guaranteed probably in excess of 150 million over that 3 years. So that straight away means they've got a strong squad to get themselves back out. The ones that have only spent a year in the Premier League come down with 1 year's parachute payments. Okay, so They've got to hit it hard in year one, otherwise they're struggling to get back into the Premier League. You've then got clubs that are really well supported in the Championship, so their budgets are up there because of the crowd. You've got goodness me, I think there was a point where Birmingham City, Wolves, West Brom, and Aston Villa all had billionaire foreign ownership, right? So you look at Wolves again, incredible history, billionaires come into the club. Mendes comes into the club, get a great coach, huge investment. They're now in the Premier League, and they didn't just survive; they were incredible. So so here's Preston North End, right? So it's the best analogy I can use. We average 13,000 people every week. Granted, we've got a billionaire English owner, but he doesn't want to destroy the club. If and I'm not going to go into numbers here, but our player salary cap that was kind of an in-house salary cap would have been half of some of these other teams. Maybe even we were bottom 4, I think, in respect of our budget, but we were a fantastically well-run club. So you're then going to compete with Fulham, who are paying Mitrovic £120,000 a week. They're paying Kenny £60,000 a week. Well, you put those two salaries together, and that fits almost twice into Preston North End's weekly salaries. So that's how difficult it is for teams to get out of that league. And I think clubs gamble. They gamble at it, and they think, like you look at Birmingham, you look at Sheffield Wednesday. The owner of Sheffield Wednesday, he owns Fred West Tuna, for goodness sake, Chancery. He's absolutely loaded. He can't get in the Premier League, and he sells all the fish in the sea. It's hard.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. But it's great fun.
Hey,
it is good fun.
Gouldy, we'll start on the home stretch now. I know it's late. You probably want to get to bed. So there's just a few bits and pieces we want to finish up with. I'll give you a right of reply. You might not want to comment on some of these. You might want to. So we reached out to Chris Greenacre for a few comments, and one of the first thing he wrote was a bit of a story, which I'm just going to read word for word. We sort of said, any Gouldy memories or moments you'd like to share? He said, well, there was one time on a Phoenix trip, and I walked past his room, looked in, and had to moonwalk back as I couldn't believe my eyes. The door was open for a start, and I could hear talking and a buzz. And he had the strength and conditioning lad crouched in the bath behind him, shaving his back for him. Bath about an inch deep in here, Gould's hand on the walls leant forwards.
Oh, dear me. True story.
So, yeah.
That's what you see. That's why it was so boring at Coogee. There's nothing to do. We had to shave our back so we could go swimming.
I was going to say, you had to get in tip-top condition to hit the beach, I guess.
So that was Greeny. A couple of comments about your frugality with money. One,
oh dear me, come on.
He's so tight he won't let you put the aircon on in the car because it costs fuel consumption. And he still hasn't broken into his World Cup bonuses from the Scotland squad he got in France '98.
No, I've spent all that money. I can't tell you what I spent it on, but I spent it all.
The other one.
As for the what was the other one? Yeah, you.
I was going to say the other one from one of your former your management team at Wellington. Just wondered if you'd been back to the Zoo Cafe for a caramel slice yet.
Oh no, it wasn't caramel slice. It was the fruit slice. Absolutely, we used to have 3 times cooked potatoes in there, and it was the fruit slice was amazing.
So good that you had it twice a day, by all accounts.
Yeah, if I wasn't busy.
Right, how are we looking, Shay?
Oh, well, while we're on a cake theme, Mexico were wondering about the cakes that you took from them at the Under-20 World Cup in Canada.
Yeah, well, this was entirely, strength and conditioning coaches and dietitians. Come on, right? I tried to explain, it's Andy Smith, right? I tried to explain to him that you've got simple sugars and complex sugars, and without either one, the other one doesn't work. And so he banned, at the World Cup, he banned us having cakes. So I walked past Mexico's room, right, saw they had loads of cakes, and I promptly stole them and took them to the lads and said, here you go, fill your boots.
Well, the lads actually said that you didn't share them with them. You took them to your room and ate them yourself.
No, not true. That's not true. We shared them out. Yeah. That's probably why we got beat 2-1 by Mexico.
Two last things just to check off while we're kind of going through things. One is ask Gouldy about the time he dyed the staff kit pink.
Yeah, I'm going to blame Derek, the physio, for that. I think it was in Canberra. It's a true story. I think it's in Canberra, and Derek had left his purple jodhpurs, whatever they were. He'd left them in the washing machine. So I shoved all the stuff in the washing machine, and as a result of that, our all-white kit came out pink.
And then Beijing Olympics. How many of the Brazilian nicknames that were on the whiteboard can you remember?
Oh no, yeah, yeah.
I've got.
My good gosh.
I've got Fato,
Yeah,
Pistello, and Ronaldo.
yeah. Bellino or something like that. There was a few. They were all on the wall. Yeah, that was surreal. That play. You walk into the hotel and you're sharing it with Brazil, and you just even for our kids, they would jump in the lifts with Ronaldinho. It was just it was amazing thing.
And is that getting involved with New Zealand football back on the horizon potentially now that you're back in New Zealand? Is that something to look at?
Yeah, I've had conversations with Danny and more around the development and the coach education. To be honest, I think I'd like to help that development end of the game. I think I've been fortunate enough to do the other stuff. I don't see myself again strategically saying I want to be the All Whites goalkeeping coach. I don't. I just want to help with the younger fraternity in New Zealand, and that's genuine.
And is this it? Is it someone gives you a call and you jump back on a plane and go back to the UK, or are we Waimarama until the rest of time?
Yeah, I'd like to think that. Family stuff always dictates otherwise sometimes. I love it here. It's it's a place to. This sounds terrible, but it's a place to die, really, isn't it? This fantastic country, and if I was buried at the top of my hill, I wouldn't argue with that.
And
it's a bit of a morose thing to finish on, isn't it?
We're not going to finish on that. Well, I was going to finish on something which probably brings you a lot of pride. It is your episode, but how much satisfaction do you see out of your son playing professional football and following in your footsteps as well?
Yeah, he's so dedicated, and he and I spent a lot of time. I got an area out here at the house that we trained on daily. We've done thousands of hours together. He's probably could have taken him into one of the football clubs that I've been at, but he's just found his own way, and he's making those steps. And I hope he gets what he deserves. I really do, because the dedication that I see from him, and I think technically he's a better goalkeeper than I was, and I just think he's probably, if I'm honest, goalkeepers now 6'3", 6'4". Yet you watch the Tottenham goalkeeper Lloris, he's not, but he's one of the best. I think I hope it comes round full circle, and people realise that it's not just about being tall; it's about being really quick and technically being exceptional when you're a goalkeeper. And
the last one from me is: has anyone stopped you in England and said, "I love your work in the world's toughest prisons"?
Oh dear. I do get second looks, and I think it's probably because I'm quite a lot thinner than him that they think, nah, it's not him. It's not him.
So for those that aren't lucky enough to be watching this podcast, Jonathan Gould does bear a little bit of a resemblance to Ross Kemp.
No, I don't.
That's really. Have you ever been in the UK? Did you ever get stopped and asked, like, "Hey, Grant, is it Grant Mitchell? Was that who he was on EastEnd?"
Yeah, this is true. Right, when I was at Celtic, they used to have lookalikes in the Sun newspaper, and there was a picture of me, and there was a picture of Grant Mitchell or Ross Kemp. And I looked at Ross Kemp, and I actually thought it was me. I'm thinking, what's that? And it was a lookalike tour. Anyway, shut it, Tiff.
Really good,
amazing. Hey, Gouldy, that has been superb throughout. Thanks for being such a good sport, and you've had such an incredible career, and you tell the yarn so well. Brilliant. I totally forgive you for choosing Sam Messam over me to the Beijing, and. Let's water under the bridge. I
apologise, sir. I'm sorry about that.
It was Stu's fault anyway.
Yeah, no, cheers, Gouldy. That's been awesome, mate.
No,
Thanks.
it's been great. Thanks ever so much, lads, and I look forward to seeing you on the tracks anyway. And maybe I can have a beer as well. You know, I should have probably got one, but there we go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gouldy.
All right. Cheers, Gouldy.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.